Alright. Alright, hey guys, welcome back to the stream. A few things today. One of them is talk about Richo, Stephen Richards. Where is it? I got stats on Stephen Richards. What we can look at. I don't. Where is it? It's in my videos or something somewhere. It's a video that I wanted to make similar to Mike Winterbottom and one that I haven't made yet about Greg Murphy. I haven't fully finished going through everything, so I might as well start just by just going through all the bits and pieces. That might be a bit easier while I just work on it. Because I'm working on 2006. Richo was a solid midfield driver. I wouldn't say he was ever a front runner, but it was interesting. He started at Gary Rogers, and they became a significant force. I guess I'll just show the work in progress. Hang on, no, not Firefox. I need to show Excel. How good was Richo? So, yes, we've got 1996 here to 1998. It was at Gary Rogers. 99 and 2000, he was at Gibson. I did not write down how Murph did in the championship, but he did 6th in the championship, I believe. And Forbes was probably way down the order. I'll just double check all that, I think. Forbes was not the top tier driver you might have been hoping for. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't that great. Rodney Forbes, 28th in the championship. How do you do that? Crashed out of Adelaide completely. Ones that he got 0 points in. Rodney Forbes. So the second round is Adelaide, I guess. No, second round's Perth in 2000. So Perth, there was it, round 2, round 6 and 7. So round 1 to round 2, got no points. And round 6 and 7, no points. So I think the top 22 or something get points. The top 20 get points in 2000. That's interesting. See, I didn't realize that. But yeah, so 28th in the championship. Then he was with Richo was with Glenn Seaton at GSR or FTR, I think, that year, 2001. He was pretty good against Sito, but Sito was actually really good. Like, look at that qualifying. Sito's in the top 5 constantly, and then he just struggles for ages. He just couldn't quite get it back up there. Richo qualified in the top 5 twice. And that's both of them in that car, but I think Sito probably qualified the car other than Richo. And Richo was with Perkins in 2002 because Glenn Seaton Racing was going back down to one car for Glenn Seaton, and he still did a pretty good job in 2002 as well. Maybe not quite up there like he wish he was, but I got a piece of chicken in my teeth. You go to Perkins where top 5 qualifying is 1, 2, 3 times. And we don't know if who qualified. Probably Richo, maybe rather than Russell, but you don't know. Russell qualified in the top 5 once. Then you got Larry. Larry wasn't too bad. He was a solid steerer. Not able to drag the car up to big results like you might have been wishing, but That's some pretty damn good results. So 13th up to 5th, 9th up to 7th. We pulled Dumbrell both of those. So then they put Dumbrell in because Russell leaves and then Larry retires. So they put Dumbrell replacing Larry. Top 5 qualifying is 1, 2, 2, and then none for Dumbrell because he was not that good. I mean, look at that. 6th in championship versus 29th of the championship. He was just nowhere near enough. But he kept Dumbrell for such a long time, Larry did. It was just ridiculous. Like, you give him 4 years to get good, and you could not do that these days. You would be out after the second year, I think. You'll be out after the first year if that was your first year. Like, it's not like the car wasn't good because you got Stephen Richards in the other car doing an amazing job. But maybe 2003, you look at it like Courtney and Cameron, but actually, it's not even a fair comparison. I've got a thing. I'll show you my my cool thing that I got going, just for fun. I gotta double check every time to see if someone's watching, see if my guy drops in. So where are we? I will stop sharing that while I find the thing. What is it called? I think it's like most experienced drivers or something like that. Most reliable teams. Like experienced versus or something like that. What did I call that? Experienced drivers. There we go. 21st of August 2025. This must be it. All right. So, my little, here we go. Experienced drivers. Oh, here we go. So, this, and we got I tell you what, I don't even know. This isn't even updated to 2025, is it? Oh, no, it is. Here we go. Yeah. So, here you're looking at James Courtney is the most experienced driver. Different colours means the different teams that they were with. So you got, oh, hang on, that should be yellow because Brody switched teams. You got several drivers who've been with the same team the whole time. So Aaron Cameron, Kai Allen, Coop Murray, obviously in the rookie season. Ryan Wood and Jackson Evans in their second year. Matt Payne and Cameron Hill. Cameron Hill seems to be moving to BJR, but for no reason. Randall and Feeney being kept. Feeney for obvious reasons. Randall for no reason. Maybe money. And like maybe sponsorship reasons. Stanaway has switched teams every year, has not been consistent. Hopefully next year he stays a premier, if he stays at all. Macca Jones has been in the field for 6 years. 6 years? 7 years in the category. He's like a Stephen Johnson of his time, except you got Cam Waters there, who's not like the son of anyone at Tickford. He's just the guy that's that good. And he's been there for far longer than any other driver had been there. Like, that's such a long time. That's 10 years at Tickford. He just knows that there's no point going anywhere else because it's just the place to be. So, yeah. But the main thing that I've got this Excel spreadsheet like this for is because it gives you a bit of an idea of what it was like 20 years ago. This is what it's like today. So we look at, see, you got the U column there for 2025 for Courtney. I think the highest it's been, so you got Frosty there. Frosty got up to V. I think the longest is probably W for Craig Lowndes, 2018. If we look, Frosty was the longest running one for quite a long time, 2 years ahead of James Courtney. We go to, well, hang on, you got Whincup and Winterbottom were both at the same number of years in the category. Rick Kelly was there longer, but he retired at the end of 2020. So we got Craig Lowndes. You got a lot of guys retired by the end of 2018, they were gone, and we had a bit of a cull. Rick Kelly retired, it drops down, but then you got Whincup and Winterbottom. Whincup retired, then you got Winterbottom, who retired at the end of 2024, not by his choice. But Lowndes was probably the one with the most years until, except before him was Russell Ingall. And I think before Russell was John Bower, 2007. But just before there, like you say, 2009, the most experienced guy goes up to O. These days, we look at, obviously we've got like James Courtney and Will Davison up there. But it's sort of interesting, you get to see how long people have been in the category for. And it gives you a bit of an idea of, do we have a lot of youth? Do we have a lot of old guys? And I don't think we have a lot of old guys. I could probably make something that has like an accumulated number of the number of seasons of experience across the field. It was probably higher in like 2020, obviously, 2019, 18, 17. You got a lot of experience there for a lot of the field. And so he looks pretty skinny there. But we've always got rookies. It's not like we're lacking bringing young talent through the field. But the earlier you go into the 2000s, the less experienced the guys are. And it's still pretty fat there. 7, 6, 5. But you got a fair few guys. Obviously Paul Wheeler owned his own team. Mark Scaife drove for 2 teams. And he was the most experienced guy who got up to U. But Bale got up to V. So I think the longest one that I've actually done is Dick Johnson went up to U. Larry Perkins was sort of surprising. I thought he would have done more years, but it gives you a much better idea because you think, oh, these guys were racing in the 80s. They were there forever. But they weren't really when you think about it. Like Larry Perkins, 1987, he did every year from 1987 to 2002, like full time. And that's 15 years, right? And, Lee Holdsworth did 15 years just about from 2006 to 2022. He was one of the most experienced guys in the field. He got up to, what's that, Q? Where did Larry get up to? Yeah, Larry got up to Q as well. So that gives you a much more relative idea because even though these guys raced in the Touring Car Championship on occasion and they did Bathurst before it was part of the championship, I don't count that. I'm talking about full time. Like they were driving in 6 out of 11 rounds. They were driving like if it was 50% of the time, that's fine. But it's got to be sort of most of the time. Like they were there most of the time. The one I got stuck on, I think, was 90. If we look at Ellery, you got Ellery here. So 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. In 98, he drove for Alan Jones. 97, he drove for himself, and he got his own team back in 99. And I think it was a 99. He didn't do all the rounds, or 98. One of those two. Something like that. But that gave me a bit of an idea. Like, okay, we've got to keep track of this because there's so many different drivers who drove. And I'm working my way backwards, which makes things harder. What I should probably do is go back to 1960 and just start from scratch. Probably be easier that way. There was one that I wasn't sure about, which is Todd Kelly, because Todd Kelly did do races in 99, but he didn't do most of the races. He did a couple of rounds, and then Bathurst and Enduros. The first time he started doing most of the year was 2000 when he was in the Holden Young Lions car. And I count that as a separate entry from Kmart Racing Team and Holden Racing Team. So by the time he gets to 2009, Todd Kelly's been at 5 different teams. Holden Young Lions, Kmart, HRT, Perkins, Kelly Racing. Whereas Rick just did Young Lions, Kmart / HSV, and Kelly Racing. So there's some that are interesting. Like, I guess we look at, I think Frosty only been with 3 teams technically, which is a really impressive feat because you got, Chaz Mostert. How long is he going to be at? He's only up to M in his career, right? Where is he? He's the 4th most experienced guy in the field. So, it's not a joke. You're not mucking around saying he hasn't got experience because he definitely does. But he's up to N there. So if we look at like who else who's in, if we go back to like 2015, who was at N? No one. He had about the same experience as Todd Kelly and Rick Kelly. Hang on. It's about the same amount of experience as Rick Kelly and Wink Up and Winterbottom back in 2015. Well, maybe we could look 2016 Winterbottom and Wink Up. That's where Mostert's at. So he's kind of, you could say, he's at the peak of his powers. He's got years left. Wink Up did another 5 years. Winterbottom did another 8 years. Mostert's, maybe Mostert's only got 5 years left. But this is like Supercars is sort of unprecedented in that it's only been modern like this for 20 years. And there's a lot of interesting little analytical things that you could say. Like they do a lot more races than they used to do in the 90s. There's more rounds. And there's a lot more talent coming through and that are competing for the seats. Where it wasn't really like that quite so much. Obviously, in the early 2000s, it was easier to run an entry, and there were a lot more cars on the grid. So you got, what was that, 30... In 2000, you got 33 cars, you got 32, 35, and 33, 34 in 2005, 33 in 2006, 31 in 2007, 30 in 2008. It's sort of dropping as the entries retracted a bit. And I think by the time we got to 2016, there were 26 cars on the grid. By the time we got to 2021, 24 cars on the grid. And then I think we just shuffled things around for 2024. But yeah, so you got like half the field's not very experienced. Like you got LeBrock, De Pasquale, Hazelwood in 2021. You got a big chunk of the field though that do have a lot of experience in 2021. And I like to think, when I think about Supercars drivers, I think who's the Greg Murphy of today? Who's the Stephen Richards of today? That's sort of interesting to me. So we go back to like 2020 or 2010, that's the number of years that Richo did. He was the 2nd most experienced guy, only up to P in 2010. But he'd been there like non-stop. He competed in every single year from 1996 to 2010. And while you could say that his best years were at Perkins, he had the most success at FPR, I think. But maybe I'm talking out of my ass. So nobody's really up. No one's at P these days, so you'd have to look at like 2020 or something. So you got Holdsworth, Courtney, and Coulthard in 2020. Those guys were at Stephen Richards level, but Stephen Richards was the 2nd most experienced guy at P in 2010, which does not seem experienced enough. Like they'd had a bit of a cull by the time they got to 2010 because, they lost guys like Paul Morris and Mark Scaife. They lost John Bow and Mark Scaife. Those guys, very successful drivers, lasted for a long time. Um, but yeah, then you get to 2009 and O was the most experienced guy, which is Engel and Richo. And so it's sort of interesting. Those guys were pretty much competing, one at Gary Rogers and one at Perkins. And then Richo moves to Gibson because he switches to go do some other stuff and he comes back and he can't get back in Gary Rogers. So then he goes to FTR, which doesn't work, which he only gets 1 year out of that. Then he goes to Perkins and he pretty much beats Engel. All right. And then Engel moves to SBR where he wins a championship in 2005. But when they were teammates, Richo was better than Engel. He was out qualifying him more often, but Engel got the race win, which was a reverse grid race win. So that's I think of Richo as like an Engel, but you see they pretty much had like parallel careers in a sense. But right place, right time for Russell Engel. He got the opportunity to go to Stone Brothers, where they built great cars and that could win races and win championships. And other people managed to not win the championship, and so he got that. Whereas Richo was driving for Perkins, which was just not the most competitive team. They could win races, but they were a bit of a battler team. They weren't. Their best times was in the mid to late 90s. That was when they were good. I think 2001 was the last time that Russell Ingall came second at Perkins. The last time anybody came second at Perkins. And that gives you a bit of an idea of that Perkins wasn't like this big budget team, even though they ran 3 cars in 2002 and 4 cars in 04 and 05. They weren't engineering top-line cars that you could win championships in by that time. And obviously Engel was up against Mark Scaife, who was doing such an incredible job. So he wasn't going to be beating Scaife. He came second, but he's probably well off in the championship. So, yeah. What else have we got? Yeah, so they've got my little numbers here. That's 2010, Richo and Engel. And then it was just Engel by himself. You got Greg Murphy, who just, after he left Kmart Racing, his career sort of dried up in terms of the opportunities. And sometimes it's just a mistake to do stuff like that. Jason Bright is an example of a driver who managed to make it work in his favour. He drove for quite a few different teams, though. Hang on, where are we looking? You got Murphy went through to purple. Jason Bright by that time had pretty much switched teams about as much as Murph. Obviously, Brighty came in a little bit later in 1998. He did have his proper debut in 1997 driving for Gary Rogers, but that's just one round at Tassie because Richo had to go somewhere. So Brighty got his debut, but then he drove for Alan Jones Racing with the Stone Brothers, and did the Enduros, and then he got his opportunity at with Stone Brothers. They took the co-driver and they left Alan Jones Racing and built their own team with Jason Bright, and then Brighty had a go at Indy Lights in 2000, and then he came back, drove for HRT. So, Brighty had some big opportunities in those days. That's why you sort of see him as he seems a lot more successful than Greg Murphy. But when Murph was at Kmart, he was, especially in 01 and 02, he was really good, and in 03. But from 04 onwards, it was just not quite there. Especially when you got a young bloke like Rick Kelly coming through, who's just sweeping the floor with Murph. So, we got Garth Tander there, went up to 2018. He drove for only a handful of teams. A bit like Craig Lowndes drove for Triple A from 2005 to 2018. Stuff like that's pretty rare, but like you do have like a modern equivalent, and you've got Cam Waters doing 10 years at at Tickford. Yeah, I like to think of Heimgartner as a bit of a. I used to think of Heimgartner as a modern wing cup when he made his comeback in 2018. Because he did, he was kind of crap in 15 and 16. Actually, he was probably better than what Wing Cup was in 2015 Heimgartner versus 2003 Wing Cup. I think Wing Cup was worse. Heimgartner had great qualifying performances and got top tens. Wing Cup in 2003 just fell off the track and got in incidents, and crashed the car at Bathurst, which does lose people opportunities. I'm gonna switch back to Richo though, and even though I like that presentation with its many colors, how good was Richo? Because I was looking at something. Here we go, 2004. Yeah, so 2004 is they've got 4 cars. They've got Richo, Dumbrell, Longhurst, and Anthony Tratt. And so it's interesting. The main thing that caught my eye was you'd think Longhurst would be like, he's been around long enough, he should be doing a really good job. And he was qualifying 30th pretty regularly, and he was struggling. Like, they put Dumbrell and Longhurst in the same car, and I'm pretty sure Dumbrell qualified that car and put it in the top 10 shootout at Bathurst. I'm not sure who crashed the car in 04. It might have been Dumbrell, it might have been Longhurst. But you can see after Gold Coast, Longhurst gets sacked. The fact that they kept him for that long, like Larry's patience must have been amazing. Amazing patience for that guy. Then they put Alex Davison in the car, who doesn't fare much better. Not really, not much better. Like qualifies 29th, qualifies 27th. But like some of these times where you go, Anthony Tratt was beating these other guys because they just kept on getting him incidents. Like Anthony Tratt's 23rd in the championship 2004. Dumbrell's 24th in arguably a better car, arguably a more talented driver. He had raw speed. He was just like a not very good driver at that time. He obviously refined it and came 9th in 2010, but his early years were like bin material. He should not have been there. He should have been getting his crap together, but Larry Perkins seemed to have incredible patience. Meanwhile, Tratty was probably not it, but he was older amongst the field. He did race in the 90s. Was it 97, 98 through to 2005 when he decided to retire and drove for HSV in 06 and put the car on the fence. We had that Drivers Only podcast with Tony D'Alberto, James Moffat, and Lee Holdsworth. And D'Alberto was talking about how he was like, "Oh, my first Bathurst was with Tratty in 06, and he put the car on the fence." That stuff was interesting. It was like, yeah, like you've got a talent coming through in D'Alberto, and you got Tratty sticks it in the fence. But I think D'Alberto had some interesting things to say, which was he was talking about how that was like the B car. That wasn't the A car. They weren't giving the co-drivers their own equal machinery car. They expected them to crash at Bathurst, and then they did. Which is just interesting, like budgeting racing, just like don't give them a fast enough car. Whereas 2004 here, is it 2004? I think it was, yes, 2004. At Bathurst, they had like the worst time. So you got Richo put it on pole. I think 04 was the one that Jimmy he ran into the Kangaroo, and so they were dropped to training first, but they were the last running car. Dumbrell and Longhurst crashed. They qualified third. They had like really fast cars. Traddy finished 18th, started 26th, finished 18th. But the other Perkins car, the other Castrol car, was shared by Alex Davison and Jamie Whincup, and they dragged it from the back up to the top 10. And they were there in first place. Out of all, they were the fastest Perkins car. They were the lead Perkins car by the end of that race. Everybody else, Dumbrell and Longhurst had gone wrong. Richo and Jimmy Rich had gone wrong, and Traddy obviously not fast enough. I think he had who did he have as his teammate? The guy who used to race for Holden Racing Team. Drove with Peter Brock. Thomas Mazira. He was Traddy's co-driver. But Alex Davison and Jamie Whincup dragged that thing into the top 10. This is why you have equal cars, because sometimes you're going to have one of those days where your A car has troubles and your B car is not fast enough to be up there. But at Perkins, they clearly had equal machinery, and the driver, it was just about driver talent. But maybe Perkins was doing the same thing as what Gary Rogers did, which is they had a lead driver, and so the lead driver got all the special treatment. 2002, you could say that Russell Ingall was the lead driver, but Richo was out qualifying him quite regularly. So you got Russell, Richo, Russell, Richo. And then they team up for Bathurst and Queensland, because of course you do. Put the two best drivers in the same car because you get a real shot. And they got on the podium twice, which saved Russell's championship. He was having a terrible time, just like barely scoring good enough points at all. Shit going wrong. Engine failure, did not start top 10. He did not have a good round until Oran Park and Winton. And then they had a good rounds at Queensland 500 and Bathurst 1000. Then a write-off at Gold Coast. Okay at Pookie. And then terrible at Sandown. Whereas Richo didn't have that bad luck. He had a bad one at Phillip Island. Solid at Eastern Creek. Running up top 10 in Darwin. Top 10s at Canberra, including a P2 in the first race. Rubbish at Perth. Solid top 5 at Oran Park. Solid at Winton. Podiums at Queensland and Bathurst. Like, he was scoring a lot better than Russell Ingall. And Russell got saved by those two podiums because he was not scoring well enough to have a good time that year. It's like he did not have one weekend where things just didn't go wrong. Apart from Oran Park and Winton, he had like a good run of 4 rounds, starting to save himself. But he wasn't good enough. Not close enough. And probably by the time Bathurst came along, he'd already signed the deal to go to Stone Brothers. Yeah. What? Yeah. What else? I do love my experienced drivers Excel spreadsheet. I was going to do 06 and I was like, I don't know. I haven't finished going through every single year of Richo's career, obviously. But, he was teammates with Greg Murphy, and they were pretty even. So Richo's as good as Murph. If I was going to do like top 10 drivers, not top 10 drivers, but I want to do a tier list of the best drivers ever in Supercars at some stage. And I want to use that website that everyone uses to do their tier lists. And I think that'd be great to do for Supercars. And then when it comes to like the real talent, I want to have an investigate. I want to look at Shaman Gisbergen's early years and be like how good was he? Like, obviously he's up against like a prime James Courtney, if you could call it his prime in 2008. you could say he was at his prime because he was doing a great job in 2008 to 2010. Oh, yeah. I don't know how long I'm going to go for because I keep yawning and I wouldn't mind eating more. So, yeah, obviously, Glenn Seaton did a very good job in 2001. In terms of qualifying, Cito had Richo easily. But Cito just was, well, not Cito, Richo was luckier in the championship. Sort of interesting, 1998 Gary Rogers. Bargs got on the podium first. He was beating Richo. He was crashed at the first race of Sandown, so Richo was up on him in the championship. But in terms of like best results, Richo's got him there with fourth. But then the next round, Bargs gets third at Tassie, and Richo's just not quite close enough at all. Then the next round at Lakeside, Richo's got him, but there was like Bargs was a real talent. Fucking hell, Bargs was a real talent back then. And so that's why Bargs ended up at Gary Rogers for such a long time. Wasn't a bad driver at all. He just, leaving Gary Rogers was probably the worst thing he could have done. Which there are quite a few Gary Rogers drivers that after they left, things weren't quite as good. You got Bagwana, you got Michael Caruso back. He did quite well in this, and you couldn't say that. Lee Holdsworth, maybe. Maybe you could say Lee Holdsworth maybe should never have left Gary Rogers because he did quite well. He was top 10 in the championship through to 2011. Was it 2009 first year in the top 10 in the championship? And then 2009 to 2011, Lee Holdsworth probably should never have left Gary Rogers. Jason Bargwanna. That's about it because in the Scott McLaughlin era, no one was close, so you couldn't say that somebody else. I mean, what about Cameron McConville? But he did quite a good job in 2006 at PWR. But McConville was probably like what was his best opportunity? McConville was he drove for Rod Nash, Lansvale, Gary Rogers, PWR, and Brad Jones. And neither of those are front-running cars. He obviously won a race in 2004 and beat Rick Kelly. But he never drove for a top team, apart from when he did the Enduros for HRT in 99. So, you don't really know if McConville was that close enough. If he was, like, when the opportunity was on, he would take it to get a result. But some drivers just drive mid-pack the whole career. Stephen Richards did have an opportunity because he was teammates with Mark Winterbottom, and that was his chance to fight for glory. But Frosty was just that much better, so much more of a raw talent, and a very successful driver. It turned out. So Richo. When was Richo at his peak? You'd probably say the early mid 2000s. When he joined Perkins, he was several years into his career here. 7 years into his career. Beats Russell Engel, and then he whips Dumbrell for years, which is not helpful. Dumbrell starts to get good in 06, but not close enough. And then goes to FPR and gets his ass handed to him. End of career. And by the time Dumbrell gets good in 2010, Richo's in a bad chassis from mid 2009 till late 2010, they put him in a different chassis, and suddenly everything is good again. Which there are chassis that do have issues. Who was it? There's a HRT chassis that James Courtney drove in 2017, and I think Garth Tander drove in like 2015, 2014, something like that. And they talked about like as a cursed chassis because anyone who drove it just struggled to make it work. They couldn't understand what it was doing, and then they just couldn't use it. It was just like a spare chassis, but then they just couldn't run it. It'd be good to do a video just looking at that one chassis because you'd see a lot of different results with it. I don't know if it ever got a podium. It might have just been that twisted a car that it just could not get a result. Yeah. What else? Okay, I want to go back to my experienced driver's PowerPoint presentation because I love that thing. It's got all its colors on. I've got this other thing which is like points here. So you got like the top line drivers. I think these are like the top 4 in 2023: Van Gisbergen, Brown, Brody, and Feeney. But I think it might also be so this is like top 2 teams. That's what it is. So you look at 2013, you got Triple Eight and FPR, but FPR had 4 cars. So you got Alex Davison down here, driving for FPR, struggling to get results here. And the way I've structured this is every 250 points, and then the total. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how good they might have been in, like who was the best driver in top line machinery. In 2013, obviously it was Whincup. In 2023, it was Brody Kostecki. But Van Gisbergen wasn't too far off. I still needed to sweep the round to win the championship though. But then you got the age, which is maybe I should do like a color thing with the age because it's just not very helpful. I've got an exercise book where I do have them broken down into colors. I think green was 20s, yellow was 30s, orange was 40s, and purple was purple was 40s, I think. Or purple was 50s because obviously you got 2014 with Russell the Muscle still driving at 50, I think, in 2014. But you got John Bowe in 2007. It was 51, 52 when he finished his career. You got Brad Jones down there, but he didn't do a very long. He didn't have a very long Supercars career. Because he did other stuff, but he was older and he was ready to just wrap it up. He was done. Did I count Radisich? I don't think I did because he didn't actually do that many rounds. But yeah, Radisich's career just sort of an unfortunate end, really. But it'd be good to look at to have that sort of comparison. Like you got John Bowe there, like you got who's at U, and I think. Where's Courtney at? Courtney's at U. So Courtney's like a modern John Bowe, except if Bowe started his Supercars career at 25 rather than 35. Yeah. And used to say the same sort of thing about Rick Kelly, but yeah. Where is it? Yeah, Rick Kelly was at what, T, not U. Obviously you got some very experienced guys on Lowndes and Tander in 2018. But what else we got? You got David Reynolds there. Has been through a fair share of teams. Maybe Reynolds is like a modern Greg Murphy. If we have a look, because Reynolds he's up to Q. There. Murph got up to P. But he definitely spent all of his brownie points by the time he got to the 2012. And he just he didn't want to drive for. He had opportunities for 2013, but he chose not to take them. To drive in Holdens or maybe not very competitive cars. Maybe Lucas Dumbrell might have been hoping for an opportunity, or Techno maybe, if they wanted to have a go at Murph. But I think I can't remember, what does Murph's book say? Oh, I've got it. It's in my lounge room. That's where I keep all of my Supercars books. So that's like 2012 there. So it's interesting how long Lowndes lasted, because Murph was there about as long as Lowndes. There was one that I thought was interesting. If you look at what the hell? Yeah, Larko and Ellery and Murph. There's the class of 97. We go to 2003, which is Larko's last year. Or was it 2000? Here we go. Yeah, Larko, Ellery, and Murph. Larko obviously drove for his own team. Ellery had his own team by the end there. And Ellery drove for Triple Eight, but I'm pretty sure Lowndes just smashed him. He did get a podium at Bathurst. That was pretty good. Bit of a saving grace for Triple Eight. That was their first Bathurst podium. But I'm running out of puff, I think. I've only been going 46 minutes. Yo! Thanks for dropping in, dude. Yeah, do you like my colours? I need to eat it. I got beans. Yeah. I've got all sorts of stuff going on here. What we got? Got Lee Holdsworth 2022 here. Run for, what's that? He only got up to 2022. So it's Q there. So I mean, you can't really say that. What did I say? I think I sort of Holdsworth is like a modern Stephen Richards. I think that's what I said before, isn't it? Because Richo got up to P there. Holdsworth got up to Q by milking it. And Holdsworth, by the time he got in arguably top line machinery at Tickford, he wasn't able to do a very good job. Where he had Will Davis and Chaz Mostert and Cam Waters as teammates, maybe not the best. Like he was pretty disadvantaged because all those guys had driven for that team before, and Lee had never done it. So it's not really fair. But you could say that also, like all the Mustangs should be the same, so he should be getting the same results. But I think back in Gen 2, they used to say, each team built, like each Mustang will be a different Mustang if it comes from a different team. They just, the way they configure everything in the car is different. Will Davison, when he jumped into the 23 red car here in 2018, he was saying, oh, it's similar. It's definitely a Tickford car. And that was the first time he jumped in a Ford since he was at Tickford when it was FPR in 2013. He had four seasons in other cars, 2014-15 driving a Mercedes, 2016-17 driving a VF Commodore for Techno. So it's not like he'd driven a different Ford, apart from obviously he'd driven DJR Fords in his first 3 years in the sport, and then later went on to be at DJR from 2021 onwards to present day. And it sounds like Will Davison's actually going to be staying And he's going to be staying in the category for 2026, but I suppose we don't. It's not over till the fat lady sings, so we don't really know if we don't know for sure. We're hearing that he's staying. We can't be completely sure that Will Davison is actually staying. So. Green is red. Green is good. Red is bad. No. So each with this, each color is a different team that they're driven for. So it'll be like their first team, their second team, and so on. You'll see if you go from like each driver, it's like Mark Winterbottom up the top. He's driven for 3 different teams. He spent 12 years at Tickford in the yellow. The orange one was Team 18, where he drove until the end of 2024. And the first 2 is like a motorsport. And so certain drivers, like you got Cam Waters down there, he's still there in 2025 at his first team. So not everybody stays at their first team. You got quite a few drivers there who you can see did not stay at their first team for their second season. But some drivers like Chaz Mostert there did stay at FPR for a number of years. Long and varied career. No. Winterbottom probably had the most consistent career. The varied ones are the ones that have the most different colours. So you got Will Davison there, the 4th one down. He's driven for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different teams. So that's a long and varied career. He's been driving every car available for all sorts of teams, front runners, back markers. Been there, done that. That's Will Davison. Been there, done that, except for winning the championship. He has not done that, and he may not do that. Yeah, some drivers. It seems a bit rare to have a driver that switches teams all the time. If I look at, you said something. It's good to be part of many teams as opposed to just being loyal to one. Depends on the success. Depends on what ends up happening. I was saying before, some drivers drove for Gary Rogers Motorsport, and they got their first opportunity with Gary Rogers. And what would often happen is they'd get good, and then they'd leave. And some of them did well, and some of them did not do well. And I think the 2 that I thought of were Jason Bargwanna and Lee Holdsworth, who left and did not do nearly as well as they did when they were with Gary Rogers. So sometimes it depends on the team, and it depends where you're going, and you can't predict the future either. You can't predict that the team you're going to that was good this year is going to be good next year. You're taking a gamble. My thoughts are don't jump ship unless the ship you're on is sinking. That's my mentality. I don't think there's really any of these drivers here who. I mean, Lee Holdsworth sort of lost his opportunity in 2018 there in the orange, because he got sort of turfed out and landed on his feet. Well, not really landed on his feet, landed on his knees at Tigford, and had a couple of results, and then they turfed him out because they had 4 drivers and 3 cars for 2021. So out he goes. But he won Bathurst, so now he's a Bathurst winner, and a lot of other people are not Bathurst winners. Yeah, it's been good for him. They usually choose to change teams, or do they often get kicked? So I think it's probably more like half and half. Like if we just go down the order here, Winterbottom, he chose. I think what was happening with Larkham's in 0506. they merged with WPS, but I think Frosty was already in conversations to go to FPR. So I think he chose to. And the same, he chose both times. The teams wanted to keep him. Courtney, I think Courtney chose to leave every time. Van Gisbergen, and usually with the longer careers, the more successful they are because they have to be, otherwise they're gone. Van Gisbergen, 07, he was technically a Stone Brothers driver, but he was driving for Team Kiwi Racing. And so they put him in Stone Brothers Racing in 08, and so he was there until he chose to leave at the end of 2012 because they were going to be switching to Mercedes-Benz, and he thought they were going to be rubbish, which they were. Then he drove for Techno, and then he chose to leave because he was going to be driving for Triple Eight and winning championships. So he chose. Will Davison, I think he chose. He might have got. I think he got an offer to stay at HRT at the end of 2010, even though he had a terrible year. He did get kicked from FPR in 2013. That was a bit of a tricky situation, that one, because Ford, they were the Ford factory team. They were waiting on word from Ford about what they were going to be doing for sponsorship in terms of Ford factory backing. And they also had Chaz Mostert doing a great job at DJR. So Davison got the boot and got signed by Betty Clemenco. But then, so he did 14 and 15 there driving for the Mercedes. And then he chose to leave to go to Techno. And then Techno kicked him at the end of 2017. And then technically he did compete in 2020, but the team folded up because their sponsor pulled out. And so but then he came back and got signed by DJR. So yeah, a bit of half and half there for Will Davison. Lee Holdsworth chose to leave at the end of 2011. 2014. What Lee Holdsworth 2014? Oh, Mercedes. Yeah, so Lee Holdsworth went to Stone Brothers for 2012, which was arguably a good opportunity for him. He didn't seem to be quite as good as his teammates though. And then they changed to Mercedes, and he stayed there, and they had the tough times. And then there was conversations like, oh, he's going to stay, and then he's like, no, I'm going to leave. So he changed his mind later in the year. Went to Charlie Schwerkolt for 2015. So yeah, he's chosen twice there. And then he got kicked at the end of 2018, kicked at the end of 2020, and retired at the end of 2022. So maybe his opportunities had dried up by that point. David Reynolds. What happened in 2010, 2009, 2010? Because Walkinshaw had cars. They signed Fabian Coulthard for 2010. Who was in 2009? Reynolds and Dumbrell at Walkinshaw. 2010 was Andrew Thompson and Fabian Coulthard. So I don't know what was going on at Walkinshaw back then. I didn't watch at the time, so a lot of what I know is what I've read and what I've seen in interviews and things like that. So I'd say Reynolds got kicked from that one and then at the end of 2011 he chose to change teams. 2015 he was kicked. 2020 he chose to leave. And then I need to move the presentations up a little bit. Or maybe we'll just ignore it. Because he's still active these days. He got kicked at the end of 23 because he would have wanted to stay because he was winning races at Grove Racing in the red there in 2023. And so he got kicked. Then I think he might be staying at Team 18. I think I've heard that he's been offered a 1-year deal for next year, which is not what you want, but I guess he's not getting any good opportunities elsewhere. Tim Slade. Tim Slade is an interesting one because he was supported by James Rosenberg, who was a South Australian motorsport supporter. So in 2009, he drove at Paul Morris Motorsport, but I think he was under the entry of James Rosenberg. And then they moved to Stone Brothers, and they were there until 2013, even when they became Erebus as well. And then Slade just had enough, and he didn't want to be there anymore, and he moved to Walkinshaw for 2014. But this is when he parted ways with James Rosenberg, who supported Nick Percat for 2014. So, Slade's chosen to move there. 2015 to 16, he chose to move. And at the end of 2019, he got kicked. So, and then 2021, 22, and then he drove for 23 and 24 with another team. I think he's had quite a few more choices rather than getting kicked. Charles Mostert is a star driver. He's had the choice every time. Scott Pye, 2013. Don't know what happened there, 2013 to 14. That'd be a great question to ask Apex Hunters United. I should write a list and then do one of those voice things or like a text message or whatever you can do, because you can send questions in, and that'd be such a great thing to hear about. Because I could probably look it up as well. There might be some information that sort of suggests what's going on. But he drove for LDM in 2013, and then in 2014 he got picked up by DJR, which became DJR Team Penske. And then it was a bit of a, I think DJR Team Penske technically kicked Scott Pye because they signed Scott McLaughlin, and they already had Fabian Coulthard under contract. So technically Scott Pye was kicked, but he was being replaced by Scott McLaughlin, so he didn't have an issue with it really. I don't think they mentioned that too much with Ryan's story. And Scott went to have a bit of success. The most success he had in his career was at Walkinshaw there from 2017 to 19, 3-year deal. He was pretty happy with that. Then he chose to leave to Team 18 in 2020. So, but we're looking at like the top drivers who've had the longest careers. Those guys have had the opportunities. It's the ones down the bottom that don't. Like you got Gary Jacobson down there. 2019 to 2020, Kelly Racing went from 4 cars to 2 cars, and they were going to be keeping their top 2 drivers. So Gary technically got kicked. Then in 2020 he was at Matt Stone Racing, and then they decided to be they decided to run their 2 young guns. I mean, technically Gary was a young gun anyway, but they decided to run Zane Goddard and Jake Kostecki, and Gary was not picked for that seat, so he got kicked at the end of 2020. 2021 and 22, he did actually get kept for that one. So, but technically, in 2021 was Team Sydney, and 2022 was Premier Racing because the team actually got sold in between seasons. So, and it was a whole different thing because 2021 he was driving the oldest, crappiest car on the grid. 2022 he was driving a heavily upgraded car where he was actually able to get some results, but they became disappointed, and then he got kicked, and he has not been back since. Macaulay Jones drives for his dad's team. Todd Hazelwood, probably a good example, I think, of a driver who's been in the mid-pack. So 2018 and 19, he was with Matt Stone Racing. I want to say, chose to change teams because the team advised him to change teams. And so he went to Brad Jones Racing for 2020 and 2021, replacing Tim Slade, who got kicked, which I could not. I was like, why would you do that? But yeah, Hazelwood got the opportunity. At the end of 2021, he got kicked out of Brad Jones Racing because Bryce Forward was bringing more money. And so Hazelwood went back to Matt Stone Racing. Then, what happened in 23? I think he chose to change teams for 23 because he went to Blanchard Racing Team, and I think he thought that was a better opportunity. There is a good interview on the V8 Sleuth podcast where Todd actually talks very openly about Sausage Sizzles. He talks about the teams he's been with, Matt Stone Racing, Blanchards. Not so much about Brad Jones, but Brad Jones was where he had his success, podium, pole position. But I think Hazelwood is probably one of those examples of drivers who was probably more of a battler, and he wasn't a bad driver at all, but opportunities dried up for him. He got kicked at the end of 2023 because they were selling James Courtney and putting Aaron Love in the other car. Even though they're expanding to 2 cars, he was not going to be in either of them. Anton De Pasquale has had... What is going on with my PowerPoint presentation? Why is... Okay, hang on. Anton did not switch teams for 22. Don't know why it's like that. He left Erebus Motorsport at the end of 2020 and went to Dick Johnson Racing. And then I think he had a 1 year an option he was offered a 1 year deal for 2025. He refused it and went to Team 18. So Anton's one of those up and coming stars who is getting these opportunities. So that's an interesting one. Jack LeBrock, bit of a battler as well, like Todd Hazelwood. He was at Techno, and then he moved to Tickford in 2020. So I think he chose to move. They were Techno were technically changing to Team Sydney. And their star driver was going to be James Courtney, but I don't know what happened first. LeBrock was probably pretty fed up, honestly. Driving in 2019, that car was a lot of crap, and it didn't get any better for anybody else driving that car. They might have made it a little bit better, but I should probably look into that one day. Whether who had it better, what years in those dark times. But he went to Tickford, which was he chose to change teams, and he probably had no interest in staying for 2020. There was even talk of him leaving mid-season in 2019 at Techno. 2021 to 22, he was kicked, went to Matt Stone Racing in what ended up being a straight driver swap with Jake Kostecki. And I think, so what happened? 21 to 22, because there's always reasons for these changes. And one of those some things you got to consider is who's sponsoring the car, because Jake Kostecki was bringing money. When LeBrock moved to Tickford, he brought some backing from Truck Assist, who were with him at the end of 2018 and all of 2019. But he drove the super cheap car with a little bit of Truck Assist in 2020. In 2020, who drove the Truck Assist car? Lee Holdsworth at Tickford. But then in 21, they had 3 cars instead of 4 cars. Lee Holdsworth got booted out, and Jack got moved into the Truck Assist car. And he didn't have a very good 21 season, so he didn't get kept for 22. Jake Kostecki came with a big bag of money, and the team actually expanded back to 4 cars, but they were going to be putting Thomas Randall in one of those cars, who was coming with Castrol backing. So LeBrock was out, and he went to Matt Stone Racing, where he had some success. And he then went to Erebus Motorsport in 2024, and he's currently there in 25. But the rumor is that he will be returning to Matt Stone Racing in 2026. So he's had some opportunities there. In 23, he chose to leave. and I guess in 25 he's choosing to leave because I don't think Erebus is a team you really want to be at the moment as a driver. You probably want to go to a Matt Stone Racing where they might have more consistent cars or something. But Erebus, I don't know. They haven't had any trophies this year, whereas Matt Stone Racing has had trophies. So MSR is probably the place you want to be. So the Brock has definitely had some opportunities there. So I think probably the higher up you go in the pecking order, the more in terms of the most experienced guys, the more chances they've had to change teams, and they chose to change teams. So I think that's when you're going to see those opportunities there. Nick Percat, I think, chose to change teams. He was offered a 1-year deal for. I'm going to move to 2025 because it's going to be easier that way. Nick Percat here. Was it Walkinshaws 2014? Then what happened 2015? He got kicked at the end of 2014. He went to Lucas Dumbrell Motorsport. I think they talked about it being like a loan or something, but so he was there for a couple of years, and then he went to Brad Jones Racing. He chose to leave LDM, which was great because that was a sinking ship. At the end of 21, he left Brad Jones Racing to go to Walkinshaws. It didn't work out, and he was offered a deal, so he could have stayed for 24, and but he chose to leave and went to Matt Stone Racing. So yeah, I think the more experienced they are, the more opportunities they've had to stay. And you got like a guy like Richie Stanaway down here. He's a pretty similar situation to Gary Jacobson. 2018 he was kicked. 2019 the team folded, and it was he didn't find an opportunity elsewhere. And then he had a what do you call it? What is it called when you go away and then you come back? It's not a hiatus. It's like something else. It's I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, he went. He retired. He declared his retirement from motorsport. Went and did some other stuff. Came back in 20. He started talking about coming back in 21, 22. He did Bathurst as an Enduro wildcard. Then went to Triple Eight and won Bathurst with Shane Van Gisbergen, and then finally came back full time in 2024 with Grove Racing. But then they sacked him. They confirmed in like July. They were like, "Yeah, we're not renewing his contract." He moved to Premier Racing, where we are awaiting the news. We're waiting. We don't know if he's been kept or if he's leaving. So I think Richie he's been kicked more times than he's been kept. That's for sure. I think he hasn't been kept at all. I mean, the comeback you wouldn't say is him being kept. We got Jimmy Golding here. Jimmy Golding was with the same team as Richie Stanaway in 2019, and the team folded on him as well. But he came back in 22 at Premier Racing, where he is still there. They're having a bit of a rough season, so there's talk of maybe getting rid of both drivers or one driver or what's going on. No one knows. Yeah, Jimmy just. I talked to him at Tailem Bend in 2022, and I was like, "Yeah, I followed you, and all the teams you've been at," and he said, "Yeah, been at a fair few teams, but he's only been at 3 teams technically. He was at Gary Rogers, and then when Gary Rogers pulled out of the championship, he was at Team 18 as a co-driver. Then he came back full time at Premier. So it's not like he kept on switching teams or he wasn't good enough. He was good enough. The situation just sort of fell apart underneath him. I would say it's similar to Lee Holdsworth, but he must have got a payout at the end of 2020 because that he should not have been booted out like that. Look at him there. He's yeah, I don't know. Break. What do you mean break? Am I gonna have a break? Is that what you mean? I usually just keep going for ages. I usually just do the 3 hours straight, no break. What do you mean? Do the drivers have a break? Because I don't think they really do. You're looking for a different word for hiatus. Oh yeah. No, there's a word. I'm gonna look it up quickly. It's usually associated with Mika Hakkinen from Formula One. Hang on, what is it called? Retirement. Sabbatical. Sabbatical is the exact word that I want. Where he's just gonna leave for the time being and he's gonna come back. Yeah, that's the word I was thinking of. Yeah, which I think is usually like a religious thing. People usually take a sabbatical. I think in Scott Pilgrim, they were like, Scott, you need to have a sabbatical. You need to go away. You need to find yourself, and then you can come back and you can kick Gideon's ass and get Ramona. Yeah, that's what the word is, sabbatical. Which I don't think in motorsport it's a bit different because they don't really go away from motorsport. They'll go and do a different motorsport and then come back, which is which I guess is what you could say Richie Stanaway did because he left at the end of 2019. He didn't do any enduros. He probably would have got the chance because he won the Sandown 500 with Cameron Waters in 2017. So you could say it's a sabbatical, but he said it was retirement. So we take that. We take what he said. We take him by his word. We say, yeah, he retired, but then he came back. Shane Van Gisbergen did the exact same thing. I think in 2012, at the end of 2012, Shane Van Gisbergen, he's down here. He's done several years. He was not, and he couldn't get out of his contract with Stone Brothers or something, so he decided to retire from the sport. He broke a few hearts at Stone Brothers, and then he came back the next year at Techno Autosports, and he won the race at the Adelaide 500. I think he won the second race. First one, he put it on pole and the car crapped itself. But the second one, he won the race. Is 2013 have 3 races or how many races did 2013 have? Like Michael Jordan in Space Jam, gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. That's what happens. 3 races in 2013 or 2 at Adelaide? 2. Okay. Yeah, he won the second race, and they were actually sitting in the Erebus garage talking to him about winning the races. And I think he even said, "It's a bit awkward me being in this garage because I've just, I negotiated to get out of driving with this team, and here I am driving for a different team who've just won the race." That was an interesting one, that whole situation. He said in 2017 that the way he did things just wasn't the right way to have done things. He probably should have gone to the Stone Brothers or something and torn up the contract, but I guess they just refused to tear it up. It was too ironclad. It was freshly signed, that 2012 contract. Renewed it from 2012 to 2015. He was supposed to be at that team, and maybe he would have been a good driver there, but he would not have become anywhere near as successful as he became if he hadn't done what he did. So But that's an interesting one. Sometimes you do have contract situations like that where they're like, yeah, you are staying, you can't go anywhere. And don't know if it's happened too much in Supercars because you got David Reynolds. Where is he? This is 2012, so he's way down here. We go to 2020. David Reynolds is here. He had a 10-year contract with Erebus Motorsport. He signed it in 2019. He was going to be there till 2029 at Erebus Motorsport. He was like, I'm so happy with this team. It's such a great team. And in 2020, there was COVID, so that impacted the racing where people were away from their families and they were spending a long time away from home. And Davey just was not enjoying things, and I guess there was a bit of conflict with him and Barry Ryan. Maybe we don't have the full confirmation, but we may get it in a documentary coming out. Is it next week or the week after? It's coming out so soon. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be so good. Yeah, they had to tear up the contract because he was like, yeah, I want to leave. They actually did talk about it a bit in they did do like another Erebus documentary. I can't remember what it's called, but I can watch it on KO. But it's great. Where he just didn't want to be there anymore, and Betty Clemenco says, "Look, if you don't want to be here, I'm happy to tear up contracts because we don't want someone if they don't want to be there." So yeah, Davey tore up his contract, 10-year deal, tore it up. The same thing happened 20 years earlier to Craig Lowndes. Here he is, young Craig Lowndes, 4 years into his career, won 3 championships. Every year he competed in, he won the championship. 2000, he wasn't very happy, and he got lured to Ford because he was driving. He was the Holden Racing team's star driver. He was the kid. He was the champ. He was the best. And it was a big controversy at the time because Ford were offering big money. They're like, we'll make it happen for you, Lounsey. We'll make it work. And he was locked away too at I think who did he have a contract with? He had a 10-year deal from like 1996 to 2006. I think it was with Tom Walkinshaw. It was like a management deal. And that's why in 1997, because you see, he started in 96. 1997, he drove in what was called Formula 3000, but these days it's called Formula 2. And so he wanted to go to Formula 1, but he really struggled in F3000. And then he came back, and they kicked Greg Murphy out of that seat so that he could be with Mark Scaife. It was a full driver change at Holden Racing Team, 97 to 98, 2 completely different drivers. But yeah, Lowndes tore up the 10-year deal that he had with Tom Walkinshaw and left to go to Ford. Yeah, brutal. And it was pretty controversial. I want to say it's controversial. There was a little bit of uproar in 2010. And like there were death threats against Lowndes for leaving Holden Racing Team because they were the best team in the category, and he left. And his teammate Scaife won the championship in 2000, and Lowndes left and drove for Ford, not very successful. Came back in and then went to Triple Eight, where he became very successful. And then Triple Eight switched back to Holden, and there was this big uproar like, "Oh, you can't switch back to Holden. Lounsey back in a Holden. How dare he?" There was a few diehards like really saying this is controversial, blah blah blah. And yeah, it was a big deal to some people. I wasn't aware of a lot of it. I think I was just like, oh, Triple Eight are driving Holdens now. Go figure. That's what I was like. I was just like, yeah, of course they are. I'm a bit more of a traditionalist. Like you can't make any changes. You just have to fix the problem. But yeah, 2 instances of drivers tearing up 10-year deals. Craig Lowndes in 2000, David Reynolds in 2020. Yeah. Surprised they don't all have contracts like that where you can just tear it up if you're not happy. Yeah, well, they probably all do, really. What they often do is they have like what's called a multi-year deal, which usually means usually they have like performance clauses or options for like if the team don't want you, then you don't get to stay. Or um, sometimes it depends on who it is, really. I think with really high profile drivers like Chaz Mostert, um, he's at Walkinshaws. He was signed on probably some good money because he was at Tickford winning races, and then they signed him to Walkinshaw, where it took a while to get things going, but he's going pretty well now. But um, he would be on good money. Um, I think Cam Waters. I think the ball's in his court. Like Tickford don't want to get rid of him. They want to keep him as long as they can, but it's kind of like I think the that the Waters would probably have it the way he wants it. Mostert, I think Mostert's only got one more year. They haven't extended the contracts of Mostert and Ryan Wood um, for much longer, but I think Mostert was definitely be one of those drivers who's under a solid contract. James Courtney is retiring at the end of the year. Will Davison is, I don't think he'd be under he'd be under a bit of like a performance clause. Like if you don't do a good job, you're out or something like that. I don't imagine that Will Davison would be under like we want you that, but I don't think he'd be on a deal where they'd be begging for him. Um, they just like they had him and they were like, "Hey, do you want to stay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I want to stay," and so they kept him. And I guess they've given him a 2-year deal because the boss of the team, David Noble, said, "I don't know why people think he's going to go because he's going to stay." So there's that. Nick Percat is on contract through to 2027. And there's some rumor about Percat's going to leave, and I don't believe a cent of that. I don't believe a word of it. I think it's a load of rubbish because where's he going to go? He's not going anywhere. He's going to stay at MSR or he's going to retire. Which I just don't think. I don't see him doing that. Heimgartner is on a long-term deal at Brad Jones. I'm pretty sure they want to keep him. And he's got a good sponsor and he's their best driver, so he'd be staying there. He'd have a pretty decent deal. And you can argue he's their lead driver as well, but I don't think it's like an obvious pecking order. No one's a number one driver. They just happen to have one driver who's their best driver, who's probably on the biggest money deal, and the other ones are like, yeah, you got to bring money or you're out. Unless you're Macaulay Jones. And a few drivers that I would say are under deals that under contracts that actually benefit that are more some contracts are probably more one-sided. Like you read about there's a performance clause but it's in the team's favor, or there's like an out clause but it's in the team's favor. And I think with the more high profile drivers, it'd be interesting to know, like Will Brown and Brock Feeney, because they're at Triple Eight. I don't imagine they would be under a deal that's too compromising. But I don't know what Jamie Whincup's contracts are like versus what Roland Dane's were like. Roland Dane was definitely like the headmaster. He'd be like, "You get your crap together, or you're out." And I reckon he said it at Tasmania, 2014 or something like that. They were crashing into one another, and he was going, "If you guys don't sort your crap out, you're both out. I don't care about your contracts. I'll rip them up." So I think I don't know what it would be like at Triple Eight these days, but I imagine that there would be some sort of equal sort of deal with Brock Feeney and Will Brown, where the team can just say, "Yeah, we don't want you anymore." But obviously, it's a reasonable team. They are the best team in the sport. they are not gonna just rip someone's contract and get rid of them unless there's a serious issue. Um, yeah, like, and it's interesting. Like, you got these different drivers with the different levels of experience, but certain drivers have the option of staying, and some drivers probably don't quite so much. Like Will Davison, David Reynolds, they're probably it's in the team's hands. James Courtney, he could stay if he wanted to, but he doesn't want to. He wants to retire. Chaz Mostert, he's staying and he wants to stay, and he's probably on a good money deal. Nick Percat, happy to be there. I think I wouldn't say he's on a big money deal. Andre Heimgartner, yeah, probably say that. Yeah, this interesting thing. Yeah. What would be a serious issue? Personal differences. So David Reynolds actually he got kicked from what was called Pro Drive, but these days it's called Tickford at the end of 2015. He was Davey's a controversial sort of guy. He'll just say what he wants to say. And he'll do what he wants to do. In 2015, Pro Drive ran a wildcard at Bathurst, which was an all-female wildcard, and he called it the Pussy Wagon, and we all thought that was hilarious, of course, and but I guess corporate management or whatever didn't like that, and yeah, Davey got in trouble over that one. And I guess there was a lot of backlash from maybe not necessarily from the team, but from outsiders. And but there's a lot. Yeah. So that was a serious issue. Then we have what happened last year with Brody Kostecki at Erebus Motorsport, where there was some personal differences. 2023, they won the championship. They won the team's championship. Brody won the drivers' championship. Will Brown negotiated to get out of his deal, because you can see here they both had deals for 23 and 24. Will Brown went to Betty Clemenko and said, "Hey, I wanna go drive for Triple Eight. I've been offered a deal to drive for Triple Eight, and I want to go do that." Betty says, "Hey, no worries. We'll rip up that contract for you." And Brody wanted to stay because he was winning the championship, and he didn't get the chance to go Triple Eight, I guess. And he stayed at Erebus, and as early as January 2024, he was talking about how he wants to stay at Erebus and he wants to win more championships and Bathursts. And what ended up happening is he went into, like, I think, was it in February sometime, there was like Erebus Kostecki shock split. And it was like, what happened? And we heard that there was personal differences between Brody and Barry Ryan and some other people. A bit of differences about what direction the team should be going to keep them as a competitive team. And I don't think that necessarily led to Will Brown leaving, but Brody wanted to stay and he wanted to have things his way, and we don't know why he didn't compete in the first two rounds of the championship in 2024, but he was under contract, and we were under the impression that he had left Erebus early, like before the season even started, and he did eventually come back and drove for them and won Bathurst and won at the Gold Coast and fulfilled his contractual obligations. And then once the time period had lapsed where um, he would negotiate with Erebus, that time had elapsed, he could finally talk to other teams, and he chose to sign with Dick Johnson Racing for 2025. And so yeah, that was that was personal differences, and I think that's probably the biggest issue really, that would break a contract like that. Craig Lowndes, I guess it was um that's yeah, it's pretty that's probably where it's the clearest of what would tear up a contract. Um, I don't think we have any other examples of. I mean, obviously got Lee Holdsworth at the end of 2020, where he did actually technically have a deal for 2021, but they didn't have a car for him. So I think they paid him out. Um, so he might have been a wealthy man in 2021. Um, but or maybe they just ripped up his contract. That might have been a clause in the contract to say, hey, if we don't have a car, sorry, mate, you're out. Um, I don't know. That's probably that's just not as much of a serious issue. Don't think there's too many examples of like major tiffs apart from Brody Kostecki and yeah, that might have been the biggest one. But even like Craig Lowndes in 2000. Not too many other examples in the 2000s. But probably Stephen Johnson's more of a sad one because he was driving for his family's team and they couldn't afford to have him in that car. They needed another pay driver. Um, so yeah, he had to retire at the end of 2012. Yeah, usually like personal differences. That's kind of the main thing. More than anything, it's not because they couldn't afford him. It's not usually an issue. Um, apart from Will Davison at Erebus. So Will Davison was allegedly on big money. I think he was on a 4-year deal at Erebus in 2015, and he negotiated an early exit from that deal. I think because he just wasn't happy. But again, like Betty is happy to tear up contracts if you just don't want to drive for the team. You want people who want to be there, and that's been her attitude. Brody, I think with Brody it was just complicated more than anything. And we don't know what happened, and he doesn't want to talk about it. He's even said at press conferences, no comment. And I think it's fair that we respect that. I think it's good to Brody that we respect that, and what he says, we can take obviously, but what he wants to keep to himself, he can keep that to himself. That's fine. So, yeah, yeah. You'd imagine that if their contracts, careers are on the line, they'd be mighty careful about what they say. Yeah, like Christopher Eccleston. Um, I think with Christopher Eccleston, I mean, it was a completely different topic, but um, with Christopher Eccleston, it was different, right? He had personal differences. So yeah, it is like Christopher Eccleston. Yeah. Um, you'd imagine that if their contracts, careers are on the line, they'd be mighty careful about what they say. Yeah, but maybe they just don't think about it. Maybe they don't have good advice. David Reynolds maybe didn't have good advice. Chris Eccleston was about how he doesn't want to talk about it. I've seen him at conventions. He's happy to talk about it. He's like, yeah, I didn't like this guy and I didn't like this guy. And I didn't think they were doing a very good job with things. And that's what he said. So, yeah. Um, I think he didn't want to talk about it before because of the repercussions back in 2005, 2006. Um, but these days he's happy to talk about it because it's like it's water under the bridge now. It happened 20 years ago. He's happy to talk about it. So yeah, that's yeah. I saw that recently because he's been at conventions. Happy to talk about it. So yeah. Um, yeah. What else? Yeah, you give me great topics to talk about here. There's a lot of like little things like someone that that doesn't really know or care too much about motorsport. You're asking me really good questions that I don't think of. But I guess I talk more about the racing and the setups and intricacies and things. So yeah, this is good. Um, yeah, what do we got? Hmm. I don't know, I'm getting really hungry. I might want to wrap it up soon. Yeah, thanks for coming. Um, all right, maybe I'll look at something else. I don't know, but there's definitely some drivers that are probably past it in terms of their ability. Um, but we don't really know. It's sort of interesting, like certain. I don't think we've had that many drivers that are like. I think we looked at like 2018, 2017. It's a bit fatter here. Like there used to be a lot of guys who'd been around for a long time. Um, whereas these days it's a bit thinner. You've got, it's like it's sucking in its stomach. You got a couple of guys who've been around for a long time and guys who haven't been around as long. They called David Reynolds a veteran in 2019. He's only been around for 10 years, and apparently that means you're a veteran. So, that means Cam Waters is a veteran, the Tickford veteran, Cameron Waters, Andre Heimgartner, the Brad Jones veteran. But I guess Jack LeBrock isn't a veteran. I think I saw him being referred to as a veteran. It's so dumb, the language. Um, I just don't think he's a much of a veteran because he's been around a while, but he hasn't racked up the numbers like he maybe could have. Anton De Pasquale's not a veteran. He's still a young bloke coming through, even though he did 4 years at DJR and he had some good success there, and he's doing a great job at Team 18 this year. So that's the difference. 9 years is not a veteran. 10 years is a veteran. Well, 8 years. 8 years is not a veteran. 10 years is a veteran. So yeah, that's funny. What would I consider veteran years? Um, I'd probably say 10 years. Yeah, I was looking at. How do I see where the 10-year mark is? I'd say Nick Percat's definitely a veteran. He's been around a long time. Waters is sort of at his prime. I wouldn't call him a veteran. I wouldn't say, if Waters has been around, I don't think Waters has been around 10 years just yet. He'll be 10 years next year because he started in 2016. He's still going at 2025. Andre Heimgartner, I wouldn't call that 10 years because even though he started in 2015, he did skip 2017. I'd say next year. Ooh. Next year, the veterans. I think 10 years is a fair, a fair amount of time. But back in like 2006, the number of guys who are actually veterans were not really. the guys who are actually veterans in 2006, Stephen Richards and Russell Engel. But I think even then, when I was a kid, I used to think of I used to think of Stephen Richards as like he was in his prime. He was going to be battling for the championship. That was him. So I guess like your early years are like up and comer. Your middle years are like your prime, and then your later years are a veteran. But I think it depends on who you are. And your success, and it depends where you drove as well. So, I don't know. That's a complicated question, that one. Whether we say that they're veterans or not. I think you've definitely got to have been around long enough to be seen as the senior driver. Like 2018, David Reynolds. And he'd been around. How many years is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This thing does that. Yeah. 9. That's 9 years. By the time in 2018. And his teammate was Anton De Pasquale. He was a rookie in 2018. You can see David Reynolds was a veteran. But not necessarily. We sort of saw him as like he's still sort of young. But he'd been around for a number of years. But so not quite. So he was probably still in his prime. But in 2019, I would have said, yeah, he's a veteran. I think we think of veterans as like old people. So I don't like seeing someone as a veteran unless they've been around a long time. So James Courtney's definitely a veteran. Will Davison's definitely a veteran. David Reynolds these days is definitely a veteran. Chaz Mostert, I would not say is a veteran. So yeah, so how many years is that? We go up to 14 years. So Dave Reynolds did 14 years before I say he's a veteran, apparently. But even in like 2017, I would have said James Courtney was a veteran. That's 12 years, 12 seasons. So, yeah, maybe 12 years as a veteran. And yeah, Reynolds was definitely a veteran in 2021 when he went to be teammates with Andre Heimgartner at Kelly Grove Racing. But then you could say that you got Chaz Mostert and Nick Percat became veterans in 24 and 25. And Chaz Mostert, his teammate was Ryan Wood and still is. And so you could have seen Chaz as a veteran because this wasn't his first rookie teammate. This was, 2015 he was teammates with rookie Andre Heimgartner. 2016 teammates with rookie Cam Waters. 2018 teammates with rookie Stanaway. 2019 no one. 2020 teammates with rookie Bryce Forward. 2022, 23 was Percat. Yeah, he'd been around long enough to see guys like Cam Waters come through as his rookie teammates. So, yeah, I guess 12 years is a veteran. Yeah, difficult. I think for them to be a veteran, they've got to be significantly experienced. If they've done their time, achieved some big results, achieved some sort of result, got some recognition in the sport. But even then, you could say Lee Holdsworth. I mean, when was he veteran? 2017, which, I think with Lee Holdsworth, it depends how long you've been an up-and-comer for. When he joined Tickford, you would have said, yes, Lee Holdsworth is a veteran. because he was like, really? This old guy's joining this top team? That's what it was like. Um, yeah. I think I'm running out of puff. It's more about what they've done than how long they've been around. Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely about that. I think the number of years is a factor, though. I think they definitely have to have been around for a certain amount of time. So you got to have done at least 10 years, and you got to have racked up some numbers. But I wouldn't have said Craig Lowndes in 2006 was a veteran, or even in 2008 when I've said these other guys who were there for 12 years. But definitely when Lowndes started getting outperformed by Jamie Whincup, which was 2008, 2009, that Lowndes was more of a veteran. And definitely by 2010, Lowndes was a veteran. So for him, that's 13 years. So it's very circumstantial, I think. Definitely, it's circumstantial. It depends because Lee Holdsworth did a number of years at Team 18, and he was their only driver, and so I think then it's like you don't really see him as you don't see his age until you put him in with other guys who are younger. Like when he was at Tickford in 2019, he was with Chaz Mostert and Cam Waters, who were the up and comers. And you've got these veterans in Will Davison and Lee Holdsworth who've been around for 13 years. And then those guys are, then they're veterans. But if they're driving by themselves, you don't think of them as a veteran until you're looking at contract time. This guy's getting old, but he's still doing a good job, so you keep him. And you don't know until you put somebody else in the car how bad a job they did. We've been talking about Mark Winterbottom on this stream, not this one today, but in past streams. Mark Winterbottom there was in his 21st season, and he was kicked, and then he chose to retire from the sport. But he was definitely experienced, definitely veteran by like 2015 for sure. Because he won the championship and he was like 36. But Jamie Whincup had won the previous 4. James Courtney won 2010. Jamie Whincup won 08, 09. And then an assortment of different drivers won 2004 to 2007. But yeah. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. I think I'm done with today's stream. Thanks for joining me, Eisner Amato. And I reckon I've had another consistent viewer, which might be my man, my regular guy who likes to join. So yeah, I know it's a bit early, but I need to eat. I need to wind down for the night. But yeah, I think we had a good run this one, and talked about some really interesting things. Good background noise. Yeah, that's it. That's what it should be. This is what you listen to when you're doing your washing or eating your dinner or something. That's what I'm here for. So yeah, thanks for watching, and yeah, have a good night. Bye bye.